Hey everyone, Viv here. In case you missed it, I wanted to let you know that we have a fortnightly email newsletter. We give you the latest recap on all things happening in our community. In there, you'll also be the first to know about our next events, merch drops, and exciting announcements. Head on over to levelasianpodcast.com/newsletter to sign up for the latest.
Look, I am a little bit fortunate. My name is white. My name's Aaron Christie-David. I don't speak another language besides English. So if I did a phone interview, I sound white. And then I turn up and they're like, Aaron. And I was like, it's me. And they're like, Aaron Christie-David. They don't realize they're doing it. Yeah, it's me, like a 6-foot brown guy. And at that point, they can't say no because of me. Now they get discrimination. So I think that's probably how I got quite a few of my jobs, truth be told. So like, dude, we can't just say no to the bloke. We've got him here. He's got the qualifications.
Before we get started on today's episode, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this podcast is recorded, the land of the Darug people. We would like to acknowledge and pay respects to our elders past and present and the next generation coming through. Now, onto today's episode. In this episode of the Level Asian podcast, we're joined by Aaron Christie-David, Director of Atelier Wealth, a multi-awarded mortgage broker company. Aaron shares his story of growing up in a large family, migrating to Australia, exploring non-traditional education routes, and building a business that helps people start and scale up their property portfolio. Aaron dives into how his migrant upbringing gave him the drive to build Atelier Wealth, and also talks to us about his next journey of finding a better work-life balance and learning to prioritise his mental health. Enjoy the episode.
One of the things that I want to start off with, Aaron, is, we work together.
Yeah.
And we've had several conversations. And one of the things, if I sort of were to describe you, you're a very relaxed character, right? That's how I describe you. But also, I think, and this is something that I really appreciate of you, is like you're someone who, despite what you've achieved, is you're actually full of gratitude as well, right? There's a lot of humility, especially with the success you had with Atelier Wealth. I guess the question I've got here, and we just spoke about your brother, and we'll get into that a little bit in a sec, is where does the sort of the nature or that sort of attitude come from? Where would you attribute that?
Without a doubt, my mum. Yeah, like I'm not leaving my dad out of the equation. My dad was definitely a hard worker, so I definitely picked up like that work ethic and that ability to work hard when no one's looking from dad. And mum stayed at home, right? So mum was pretty much that primary caregiver in that sense. And my mum was a big subscriber to Oprah. Oh. So, I think now I'm like, you call it NLP, you call it stoicism, for example. My mum had that before they were like mainstream ideas on YouTube. So this, my mum, attitude of gratitude, for example, what one hand does, don't tell the other hand, almost to the point that I was too humble. Mm-hmm. Like there's things that we maybe did as kids and mum's like, we don't share it because like we don't beat our chest. Mm-hmm. And they're wonderful qualities. I think sometimes sharing is caring because it inspires or it encourages other people. So there's humility is one thing. Sharing with the right people who are happy for your success is the other. But I think my mum was, don't put yourself so far out there because tall poppy, I think, was probably something that she had in mind. And I think it was just like, whatever you did, just be as good as you can. And so whether we grew up playing cricket, be the best possible cricket player you could. My mum, when we grew up going to church, for example, so I think mum's faith had a lot of part to play in that, which talks about too much is given, much is expected, for example. There's so many different parts. There's coming to this country is a different leveler. I think we all agree, and a big part of what you purported in your message is our backgrounds will then influence us so heavily coming to this country where you have to be so humble because you start from nothing. Yeah.
That's right.
All right. So you come here with an empty stomach and not much in your bank account. That's humiliating. It's fine. Yeah. So you have
That's
to
reality,
work hard.
right?
Like, the cars aren't great when you start. The shoes aren't nice. You live in some rougher areas, for example. So I think all that kind of will layer itself to go, man, like be humble and stay humble because we've come from those roots as well.
Well, speaking of like growing up, I think we definitely like to start at the beginning, meaning, childhood. Yeah. And when you did the prep call with Viv, looking through the notes, Saudi Arabia. Tell us about that.
Not great for your passport, I'll tell you that.
Doesn't get you anywhere.
I'll tell you that. So background is my parents are Sri-Lankan. Dad moved to Saudi Arabia, a bit like how Aussies would move to the UK or Dubai, great for tax and income. So Dad moved there, was an engineer by background. And so my older brother was born in Sri Lanka. Then Dad was kind of back and forth to Saudi, then moved back to Saudi for a number of years, which was where I was born. And then Sean, my younger brother, was born in Australia when we migrated. So those years were spent in Saudi. They were tough years from like when my parents, I look at it now going, I've got 2 kids. We live, like you mentioned, we live on the South Coast. We've got a pretty good lifestyle surrounded by family. I don't know how my mum raised 2 boys in like an apartment in a compound that she couldn't ever leave without my dad, because under Saudi law, a woman just can't walk out the door without one being, and we're not Muslim by background, but like being dressed head to toe, has to be accompanied by my dad. No mobile phones. My dad works some insane hours. So imagine, I don't know, imagine I've got a lovely wife, but imagine I left in the morning. I was like, I'll see you when I see you. And I don't know when I'm getting home, and you can't contact me all day.
You can't leave the house.
Our mind gets blown. And yeah, you can't leave the house with 2 screaming kids and no family around. Don't know the language.
There was no internet back in the day.
No, mate.
Wow.
Probably like a TV. And so, yeah, I think part of my mum's resolve was like, that's a different challenge for a new mum. I always tell my mum, like, I don't know how you did it. I don't think she knows how she did it, because she had nothing to compare it to. And she says what we have. It's like, yeah, this is a different style of parenting that we've got as well, and raising kids. But yeah, mate, it's so Saudi Arabia was there for quite a few years, and then at that stage, if anyone's aware, like the civil war in Sri Lanka was so savage, going back was not an option. So they offered the opportunity for Sri Lankans to either choose Canada or Australia. I think my parents heard how cold Canada was.
I was going to say
Australia,
warm weather
man,
it was.
Let's go there. And I'm glad they did. I mean, everything's slide indoors, and then to come to Australia, and then Dad's part of a big family, so all our families in and around Sydney. So we're pretty lucky that most of our...
Oh, so you already had the family infrastructure here?
So my dad's sister was out here, and that, like any ethnic family, it kind of opens a door for the remainder of the family to start coming over. And so, yeah, Sydney became the base for my dad's one, I think. One of 6. So then all our cousins, we grew up having all our cousins here, for example. And so you've been pretty lucky, because you speak to a lot of families who've got family all across the world. We're all across Sydney. It's pretty special.
Yeah, it is. And, we talk about the fact that we sort of grew up here with just a direct family, mum and dad and siblings. All of the cousins and extended family are still, overseas.
Right.
And, I don't think I necessarily, as sort of growing up, felt necessarily isolated, like not having family there, because it was all I knew. I didn't have a reference point.
Exactly that, yeah.
But certainly I think my parents now, when I talk to them about it, they sort of talk about that a fair bit, where they go, oh, look, it's in hindsight, we probably would have tried to get more family over, because it's actually quite important. I sort of see some, friends who have sort of large extended families, they all support each other.
Correct.
In that. So I imagine it probably would have been a bit like that for you guys.
Absolutely. I think my grandmother realised, she's, what do they call it? Matriarch? Yeah, so she was head of the family. She ruled the roost type thing. And I think that's one thing that my mum always said to her, is like, look how lucky you are. You got all the family here, and some people get left behind in those countries. But to have everyone together, so I grew up, like our Christmases were like 50 plus in a house. Like, nice. I don't understand the concept of a small Christmas. Even now with our family, I'm like, I know a big Christmas, like people have weddings. I'm like, that's my immediate family.
That's your dinner on a Thursday night.
50 people. There's no such thing as a small wedding. Right. Yeah, so I think I look at that going, we've got some great cousins, and we all grew up together, great relationships. But yeah, I think that's one thing where we're genuinely fortunate to have everyone around each other as well.
And where'd you grew up? You guys migrated first to Sydney, or?
Yeah, Sydney. Okay. I think we landed in like near Canterbury. So Canterbury Road, if anyone's got a reference point, probably not a great place to raise kids, right? Notorious hookers.
Prowlers,
on like Canterbury Road. So I think they probably saw that going, not the ideal spot for kids. I'm glad they made the move. And then we moved to Fairfield West, kind of where we grew up. And then the rest of our like adolescence was in Adenza Park. And so my three brothers, it's funny, 3 different countries, majority of our lives, 3 different primary schools, 3 different high schools, 3 different unis. And I think that looking back at our childhood was probably great for us because we had our own identity growing up, independent rather than being someone's brother, apart from a couple of years in primary school. And I went to school at Macquarie Fields High, which was half selective. And I joke, it was like, it wasn't very selective at all. So my younger brother, he's a smart one, right? So he got into Hurlston. My older brother was like the talented sportster. So he got into Westfield Sports. And my parents were like, what are you doing? Send him to that school. They'll take him. And and
well, I don't know. I went to
School of
Sefton.
Hard Knocks.
Sefton was also half selected.
Yeah,
I was like, well, sometimes, and it was funny because by HSC time, I think it was year 11 and 12, they joined the cohorts together, the community and the selective. And I swear to God, I reckon half the community did better than the selective kids. Because it was just one of those things you get into selective and you think, oh, my job's done, you know?
Isn't it?
There's a bit of that complacency.
100%. You talk about that level, and I think the community kids stepped up almost a little bit, whereas the selective kids almost had that little bit of right about that I'm here. And you see it in uni. I saw that big jump where the selective kids were probably tutored up the wazoo. Well, I was anyway. And then I got to uni, I'm like, no one's going to force me to go to class.
There's no hand-holding,
There's no detentions. I failed 3 out of 4 subjects. Like, you don't have to turn up. This is awesome. It's optional. And that's when I think I saw that big difference between the kids that was self-taught versus tutored. I certainly struggle with that transition, for example, as well, because again, culturally, it was like, if you don't do it, we're going to kick your butt.
Yeah.
Whereas uni's like, we'll still take your money off you, whether you pass or fail.
And education was like a big thing, I imagined, with the household. Like your mum probably would push you.
Man.
Yeah.
Non-negotiable. I think my mum may laugh now, but our school holidays sometimes we're going to Dimmicks.
Oh, yeah.
My mom's like, we're going to the city. It was Cloak and Dagger. We're going to the city. My brothers are like, awesome. And we're like, Dimmicks on George Street. Like, damn you,
Back
Mum.
when there were
You got
bookstores.
us. And buying like, I think Peter Howard or one of those
Textbooks, right?
one of those books. And that was our school holidays, like doing homework. And Mum was like, idle hands, idle minds are a devil's workshop. And I guess with 3 boys, man, she's outnumbered. So I guess the only way was like to rule with an iron fist and to get us to study. And I guess seeing my dad in a blue collar role, every time I went, and so holidays I'd either be at home or go to work with my dad. And so those years, like again, adolescence type years, I'd go to work with my dad, kind of learn how to be on the tools, for example. But the whole time, everyone that was a mechanic, everyone that was on the workshop floor was like, don't ever end up here. End up there in the office, end up in a cushy white collar job. Don't be out here. So very early, so I can't fix a car, right? Got a basic knowledge. But the goal was, uni was like not even a question. It was like, that's just where you're going to head up. It's like, which uni were you going to go to? Which I'm grateful for, because I speak to other people and they're like, when they said they were going to go to uni, their families laughed at them.
Oh,
do you know what I mean?
that's a very different perspective.
Isn't it? And I was like, oh man, the support that we had was like, you're going to uni, well, what are you going to do and where are you going? So I think that level of support's where I'm super grateful as well. And we come from a family that set a pretty high academic bar, like our extended family. So again, it was almost like healthy competition amongst family.
Right?
You don't want to be like the weak link in the family.
The family shame, right?
Oh, totally, right? Your parents just, get embarrassed, if you don't come home with like a high mark or something, right?
That's it.
I'm just curious as well, because there's 3 kids in our family.
Yeah.
And like I always say this on the podcast, I grew up in Wagga. So a lot of my adolescence was in Wagga. However, my sister, middle child, she grew up half. So half Wagga, but then most of her high school was in Sydney.
Right.
My brother moved straight to Sydney when he was very, very young. But what I've noticed is all of us have very different identities, and I'd never picked up on it until you just mentioned it.
Yeah.
But do you find that there's any difference of how you guys were raised and how Sydney versus all the places that you were influenced and shaped who you are now?
It's amazing. I've got 2 girls. I'm like the same parents, the same upbringing effectively, or parenting so far, wildly different kids. And the same can be said for myself, my 2 brothers, same probably for your 2 other siblings, same parents, same environment, 3 super different children and outcomes as well, which is special. My older brother, my parents were super strict on him. There's no doubt. I think that's the oldest child. You probably have a
The weight,
right? It's like the weight of the parents. Like we're putting all our trust in you, oldest child, on the middle child, and again, it's like get the best of both worlds, but they're not really sure what to make of you. And then the third one's like can do no wrong,
just do whatever you want.
Yeah, can do no wrong. And I'm lucky. Sean's pretty self-motivated, so I think for him, my parents were a little bit more relaxed in terms of like being as strict. But he was self-motivated, so they never really had that problem. For me, I was a problem, and I'm not labeling myself as like they're like school prefects and
they were ticking boxes,
and I'm getting detentions and like after school like parent-teacher interviews for the wrong reasons. But I look back now, and I've had a chat with my mum. I'm like, I probably would have been better maybe a Montessori style or a Steiner.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm
you're just different learner,
more tactile, for example. In my own time, if I want to learn, when I want something, I'll go after it and I'll learn it. But when it's forced upon me, I'm like, I'll just go the other way. Yeah. And I can probably see elements in parts of my two girls as well. So it's like what works for one child. I think my parents had that as well. Different schools, different needs, different styles of learning, but that traditional classroom style, I'm like, that's probably why I'm so keen to get our kids into like non-traditional styles or find ways for them to be non-traditionally educated, just because I think it has its own limitations as well, right?
When you say non-traditional, I'm actually curious because I have very similarities to you. I didn't really sort of excel very well academically in school. Yeah. Felt a little out of place because almost felt like I wasn't smart enough. Like I was like, everyone's picking it up. I'm like, what the hell is wrong with me? Especially maths. And
which is like, you're like the Asian kid.
Exactly. Right.
Assume that you should be doing 4 units.
So I'm wiping out the stereotype here, but I'd struggle with these. And it wasn't until and I mentioned this on the podcast before, watching a talk by Sir Ken Robinson, who's this, and like, may he rest in peace because he recently passed away, but he had this very interesting TED talk, and he talks about how, a bit like what you said, some kids just are wired differently, the way they, sort of learn and everything like that. And he gave the classic story of a kid who essentially, the teachers thought that she was a problem in class. Right. She was short attention span, essentially diagnosed her with like some form of ADD or ADHD. And then it turns out, and I'm missing the name here, but it turns out the parents were wise enough to take her to either some sort of, I guess, therapist or some specialist. Yeah. And they figured out that they basically said, your daughter just wants to dance. And so they took her to dance school, and then she ended up, I think, writing or being the person who came up with Phantom of the Opera and a whole bunch of it. So it's like these are insane stories. But anyway, going back to the question was non-traditional. Have you explored any of that? Because I'm actually curious. Sort of my son's like obviously he's not at school age, but yeah. So our two girls go to a Montessori at the moment, and my mum, for the latter part, when she returned to work, she became a Montessori teacher.
That's really nice.
Educator. So I think it's, again, a different style. So my mum raising us was very traditional in the sense that you sit there, you read you do your answers and you do your textbook style learning. And now having our girls and they go to Montessori and seeing the way that they've responded to a Montessori style, it's little, I won't say inconvenience the word. It just means that, instead of a 5-minute commute in the area, it's like an hour round trip to drop our girls off and come back to the office. But as a parent, that's what you do, right? To give your kids every opportunity. Because I think you don't want to have that regret going a little bit inconvenient, but is it worth it for the greater good? And seeing the way that they've adapted to different learning styles as well. So I have a gut feel that they will learn very differently. They'll go to different schools. Whether we continue with it for primary school, I don't know. I don't have that answer.
You're still figuring it out.
Yeah. But yeah, I encourage every parent to go, look, some kids just won't learn. And you look at some of the kids, I'm sure you're probably the same with who you went to school with, and the ones that you thought would do really well in their careers so far, you're like, I've seen some other people. They used to fly under the radar. I'm like, now they're doing some insane jobs. I was like,
freedom.
Right. They just found their feet. They found their jam. And it was exactly that, going, if they had the parent that maybe was a little bit more attuned or had that, maybe the resources as well is probably a big thing as well. Imagine our parents telling their relatives that their kids going to like dance school, like flip out, right?
Yeah,
like,
they would.
Your child's going to end up in the gutter, and then like, what do we come to this country for? To do a dance. That was my thing. That was my mum's thing. It was like, when you come to this country for you to play cricket, I'm like, The world got its revenge because my wife actually went to work for Cricket New South Wales.
Oh,
I was like,
wow.
well, there we go.
Irony behind it.
Cricket does have a part to play in our life. But so my older brother probably had he was probably pretty gifted at cricket, and then it got to that stage 11 and 12 and I was like, no, academics come first over sport. Yeah. So I look at it going, could we have been good at it? Potentially. Could we have been great at it? You'd never know.
Well, I mean, speaking of your brothers, I mentioned we spoke to Sean, your brother, who runs Plate It Forward. Incredible social enterprise, which I'm so interested in actually exploring, and we're going to do a bunch of content with him and his restaurants as well. But, you're a business owner. He's a business owner. What does your older brother do? My older brother's a CFO for an aged care business. Okay.
So, and then, but you see us, and then, my extended family, my dad ran his own business. His brother, my dad had a mechanical business. His brother had a tire business. One of the other brothers was the CFO as well.
So business is in the blood of the family in a lot of ways,
I feel like there is a little bit of that entrepreneurial, we call it entrepreneurial spirit. I don't particularly love that word, but that I think we've got a problem with authority is how I look at it in our family. That's the best way to describe it. So you don't want to work for someone, so you go and do it yourself. So headstrong. And that's certainly in the nicest possible way. That's probably how Sean is. For me, I just like doing it my way. I was in corporate. I did pretty well in corporate as well. But I just need an environment. Again, it's like learning. I couldn't be a square peg in a round hole. So therefore, we'll go and do it your way. And I have. And I look at Sean and his journey. I'm like, he's my younger brother, but I look up to him because he's setting such a high standard. But I see him through a brother lens. Everyone sees him through the
Sean, the person at the business owner.
Sean, the business owner lens. And so it's very hard for me to like see him through that way because he's still my little brother. But then I'm like, when I see him in his zone, when I go to the restaurant, I'm like, right, this is the new identity of Sean, and he's found his jam. And everyone jokes because like our worlds have crisscrossed. So Sean grew up doing finance at uni, worked for like financial services businesses like Perpetual and Royal Bank of Canada. And I did my undergrad tourism and marketing and hospitality.
Yeah, right.
And I worked in a bar. I love cooking. I love food. And it was like, isn't it funny how like you
just dovetailed
our lives are just incredible switched across. And I think it just shows like passion is one thing. It doesn't mean you have to pursue your passions because I love food. But being around it, I probably would have fallen out of love it pretty quickly. Yeah. Whereas property, home ownership, that's something that I care about. It doesn't mean I'm passionate about. I just care about it enough to go, right, I'm going to make that my jam. And Sean cares. I don't think it's only the food side. I think it's what it stands for and how it helps.
It's the vehicle,
people.
Right? Yeah.
And Sean's pretty good like that. I'm more capitalist. Sean's more a socialist.
Yeah.
And it shows up.
Atelier Wealth, tell us about that, because certainly even before we started working together, I already knew about yourself and the brand. And you, I would say, and you would probably, being the very humble person you are, say no to this, but one of the more recognizable people in the industry with brokers, right? And certainly been around for not just a long time, but got a very professional brand. Can you sort of walk us through how you started the business and what that journey was? Yeah, I'd love to know.
Bernadette and I were in Thailand at this restaurant. This is where it all starts. And there's things in life where you just go, I can recall the
Key
smell,
moment.
the sight, the sound, the who, the where. So we're sitting at this restaurant in Thailand and there's an Indian guy running it and it's jam-packed. The reviews on TripAdvisor are through the roof. And it's like, go and speak to this guy. I'm like, how's an Indian guy in Thailand running a seafood restaurant that's like sold out? Sitting there and he just catches my eye and we have a chat. He's like, let's have some beers. And he's having a beer while he's working. I'm having a beer. It's like, he's like, this guy's your best mate. I'm like, yeah, it's cool. He goes, don't leave. Let's have a chat afterwards once the restaurant's shut and we'll just have a chat. I was like, how did you do this, mate? And at that stage, I was working at Commonwealth Bank in marketing, like so a snapshot in life. And he's like, hey man, I just came to this country. I work hard and the Thais hate me because I work hard. I work harder than them. I'm like, how do you outwork a Thai? They work nonstop. Yeah. And he's like, and I just get everyone to leave me reviews. I just like focus on every person that comes in. I love them. My hospitality is great. I was like, yeah, genuine. Like you genuinely cared about it. But he's like, if you're going to do anything, read The Richest Man in Babylon. And that's what he said. Just read it. So we got home and Bernie's like the action taker. So she's like got us copies and we've read it like, this is amazing, this book. And then it got to the stage where, I mean, that dissipates a little bit. And then our intention was, when we got married, was to move to New York. I was going to do my MBA, try to get a green card. So we're sitting in this apartment trying to do this green card lottery. We've got no idea what we're doing. We're going to take over the world and go do this MBA. I said to Bernie, I'm like, what am I going to do for work? And like be in a cafe maybe while studying at NYU. I was like, I don't know. What are you going to do? And I was like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, this is the worst plan. And then my older brother was going to do his MBA, and we're pretty close. So he's like, why don't you do it with me? And you got to do an application. Like, you got to answer all these questions. And Bernie will say, like, I'm pretty good at writing. Like, writing was one of my fortes. And I got stuck. I just couldn't write this application. And I said to Bernie, I don't think this is right for me. And then we went away and we're in Vietnam for our honeymoon. And she's like, hey, because part of my role is working with mortgage brokers. And she's like, hey, brokers, you've been around finance for a long. Why don't you become a mortgage broker? I got 2 degrees, man. Like, my mum will have a heart attack if I don't become a mortgage broker. And then we got back, and then a couple of weeks later, she's like, we spoke about it. Why haven't you done anything? You haven't done anything about it. And almost like challenged me. And I think that's probably that's that nerve that hits me. I was like, right. And I just jumped online, and there was a Mortgage Choice franchise for sale in Alexandria, which is a great spot. Called him. I'm like, what's it going to take to buy it? Like, speak to the guy who owns it. And I got it for a song. Right? He was leaving. He was retiring. And at the bank, I was moving into a different role, and I wasn't really particularly enjoying it. And that's when I'm like, guys, I'm out. And it was literally like, I did a business plan in 2 days. There was no backup money. We were married 6 months at the time, and we had a couple of properties. And Bernie will say at that stage, she was a grad, so she was on about 55K.
Oh, wow.
Paying rent. And I'm like, I'm going to start this business. And so she's like, yeah, go for it. And everyone else was like, you're mad. And that's how it started. And then fast forward 12 months, and it was getting really good traction. And that's when one of my mentors was like, hey, look, why don't you leave Mortgage Choice and go out on your own? And it's well documented around, I guess, franchising and some restrictions. And I said, look, we just gave it back. We didn't even sell it. We started from zero.
Oh, no way. Really?
Yeah. And it's like, well, could we sell it? I was going to stay as a broker, so resellability and a little bit of friction with the franchisor. I was like, man, let's just cut this off. Let's just start fresh. And I think being able to have my own brand became really important. I guess with a marketing background, the brand was an extension of who we are and how we wanted to be seen in the market. And it was just hard work made after that. And I think anyone that's done particularly well in any industry, it was failure was not an option. We worked incredibly hard at that stage, 6-7 days. And Bernie would say, look, we're newlyweds, we're in the office on a week. And I was like, the payday will come. What are we going to do? Sit at a cafe or sit at a beach? Like, come on, let's work.
Yeah, put the heads down now.
Writing loans is fun, believe me.
Trust me.
And she's just like staring daggers at me. But that was Bernie. She's like, well, if we're going to do it, we're going to make this work. And we had to, because there was zero income. And I doubled down. And then Bernie's brother joined us, so my brother-in-law, and that was interesting because it was like husband, wife, brother-in-law. Every golden rule in business you read is don't mix family and business. Let's do it. But it's worked. Like we have a great relationship, a working relationship. If you've read the E-Myth, we say like we're that golden triangle. You've got like the ideas person, Bernie's the general manager, and Damien's a technician. So you put us the three together. It's like it's a very powerful combination, not without its issues. We'll tell anyone, like Bernie cried for the first month. I'm like, too bad you can't leave, right? It was like, because she joined my business and that identity, she left a great role where she was really valued to join a business where she had no idea, big transition, no money, big transition, right? And I was like, if we can get through this, and so there was milestones I think we plotted out, get through the first 6 months. Then in broking, to your point about mortgage broking, the failure rate is 50% will fail in their first 18 months. Okay, let's get to 18 months. Then in business, 2 out of 3 will fail in their first 3 years or something along those lines. Let's get to 3 years. Then it was like, I think 4 out of 5 are not profitable at the 5-year mark. Right, let's hit profit before then. And so it's just been these milestones. We'll turn 7 in July, and it was like 7 years. And then we know what the 10-year mark is going to be. So we've got 3 years to go. And it's like, I think we've had that little bit of vision and foresight, which probably helped to your point around, okay, how have we stayed the course a little bit? And I think even before we had a chat, which is you can say, and at that growth mode, because that's when we start, is like you say yes, 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 and you say yes to every opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think now the business is going in a different direction where I'm like, now it's risk.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's people. I've got a mortgage, for example, 2 kids. My decision-making is so different and it makes me uncomfortable because I'd say yes to everything, but I'm like, they call it the dumb tax. If I make a bad decision, it's going to set it so far backwards. So I think avoiding brain damage is making less bad decisions, but also means not saying yes to everything as well, which goes against the grain of self-starters because you're like, I'll make every opportunity work, but is it worth every opportunity as well? And I think that's where that I'm starting to see that difference start to kind of rear its head.
Because the business, you know, you sort of, this is now our 3rd year, so less than half the time that you've been in business. But I can certainly feel, especially coming up to this 3rd year now, sort of a level of maturity around decision making, and that is to say, being careful about what we commit to now, and also the factors like you mentioned. You know, there's the HR component for us. There's the capacity, what's sustainable, and things like that. Whereas, you know, you sort of were in a more scarce mindset at the start, where you just sort of were scrapping for things, right? So, like, what kept you guys going? Because, you know, Bernie was crying the first month. You know, like obviously you had to, you know, build your reputation over time. So the Aaron Christie-David of year 1 in Atelier Wealth versus now is quite different. And, you know, you wouldn't be, you know, necessarily getting the type of business you are getting now. So were there certain things that helped, that kept you guys going? Because you're like, we got to get to 18 months, we got to get to 3 years, we got to get to 5 years, et cetera, that helped you along the way.
Yeah, it's definitely the power of a good network is one. So, you know, done every sort of networking there is. We said yes to everything. Part of a BNI at one point, so I'm up at the crack of dawn. And that served me for that time in that season, right, in business. Good accounting advice. I think that's probably where I see a lot of businesses, and we deal with a lot of businesses. That's probably where it makes or breaks businesses. Ego and cash flow are probably heavily interrelated. I had a nice car, sold the car. I drive a not fancy car. I had a Golf GTI. I sold that for an 8-year-old Mazda 3. And the first question everyone said was, is business not going well? And I was like, that's the perception that I needed. I needed my back against the wall. Because it's vanity. Like drop the suits, for example. The office wasn't fancy. So just these small things where it's like the trappings of like perceived success. Whereas like, no, we got to rethink success. Success is, it's not a crude word to use. It's profitability, man. Like you got to be, I'm not saying insanely profit where we're at the detriment of like paying staff. Everyone gets what they're paid for. The investment is into the business. But the business needs longevity, that there needs to be some healthy vault money that if anything was to go wrong, we're not making bad decisions again from that scarce headspace, because we've been there. Like this is good management now. And, you know, the business isn't used as an ATM. It's we get paid a salary for the business for the value that we bring. Profit is then on top of that. And I think we've had to go on that journey. So, you know, if I was to drive up in a very expensive car and I tell team, you can't get a pay rise, what's the first thing that people would think? I'd be the exact same way, going, hang on, man, you got a fancy car, but you're saying you can't afford me and I'm giving all this value. We'll play the long game. Of course I want nice things. We all do. That's why we're kind of wired to work hard, but in due time is kind of how we look at it. And this is not the right time for indulgence.
I don't know if it's maybe a migrant mentality, because migrants play this ultra long game. Like I get told when I was young, it was just like, just work hard for the next 30 years of your life, right? And maybe you'll do all right, right? And it's like, I think we have really, and I don't know if it's the same for you, maybe it was something your mum taught or your dad taught, it was like delayed gratification. Like it was this really thing that was ingrained in at least my experience growing up of the, hey, like you really want this thing right now, but just resist it. Like you just became very good at struggling against what you really wanted.
The time will come.
Yeah.
Right. But I think they had the cash. They're going to do what they had with the cash. There was no, even for them to get a loan, like a home loan was like a major deal.
Yeah.
Major deal. They couldn't get car finance because their credit wasn't, the history wasn't there. Parents took stuff in cash.
Yeah, everything was cash.
You can't declare that to the bank to get a loan. Whereas now we've got a lot more sophisticated ways to get money pretty quickly, right? You car finance, you just get a car finance like that. You want the loan, you want the watch, like you can afterpay, whatever you want, you can get it pretty easily if you're savvy enough. Which I think then that notion of delayed gratification to your point there, that takes harder work because it's easy to go, well, I'll just get a loan and buy a really nice car. And it's like holidays on credit cards. Our parents always said, if you can't afford the holiday, you just don't go on it. So now we've got to save up, and it's something that stayed with me. I'm very lucky that my wife's the same as well. They live within their means. I think the big difference between myself and my wife's family is they speak very openly about money. We didn't.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I never knew what my parents' debt position was or what their cash flow position was. We knew it was a good month if we went out for a nice dinner, right? Those just like small tells. Yeah. Whereas Bernie's family, when we were dating, they're like, finance Saturday was a thing, and they'd pull up the spreadsheet. What's the mortgage?
Really?
What are they earning? I was like, should I be in this conversation?
You felt really uncomfortable in there?
Because and it's, I don't know if it's an ethnic thing. Her dad's Australian, her mum's Fijian Indian. Right. Was it a cultural thing, or was it some family spoke openly about money? And like, no, you're part of this conversation. You can see. And I thought, oh wow, isn't that nice that there's no qualms about money or what everyone's earning. It's just a number. So yeah, I think there's different attitudes around money and how we see it. But I think the discipline around delayed gratification, we see it all the time. I mean, money's my game, and loans, right? So people that want the nice car, but they're debted up to the eyeballs, a nice house, debted up to the eyeballs. It's outwardly it looks great, but inwardly it's like mortgage stress or a bit of pain and relationships. The biggest issue there is money.
I feel like the notion, and your messaging is pretty consistent with this, is you're really, as a broker, involved in not just getting someone access to credit, but really just actually helping them, on their pathway to, let's call it financial freedom as a bit of a buzzword. But at least certainly from again, going back to a migrant mentality, property is seen as the pathway to wealth, right? And so how's that sort of helped you or influenced you in terms of Atelier Wealth and sort of helping people with this stuff? Because you're obviously not just passionate about, just writing a ton of loans and your loan books being big, but there's actually the commission part of it. Yeah.
The way I explain it is there's no loan without a home. I can't sell a loan. Like there needs to be a property involved. And I think that's probably one big area that we really advocate for is ask anyone, what did you buy the property for and what was your interest rate 2 years down the track? They won't really know. Some people know the detail, but majority of people go, I don't know, it's somewhere around here. And so when they come to us and they're freaking out over the interest rate, I was like, in 2 years' time, I'll ask you and you won't even remember. So you're worrying about the wrong thing. Worry about trying to buy the right property that's in the right area that you can afford, that's going to appreciate that in value the most. So I think that's where we come from it from a different perspective, going, man, you're focusing on the wrong part. We do the loan, we'll get your loan approved, but you focus on the property. And sometimes that can be a fresh perspective for a lot of people, and it's not the traditional mortgage broker message, but I think more brokers are really doubling down on that type of that philosophy as well, which I think is great. 0.001% on an interest rate is not going to change your life. Yeah. That property doubles in value, or a bank tells you that you had to sell that property to buy the next one. We're saying no, you don't have to sell it, keep it as an investment. And then imagine in COVID, like that property value doubled. That's wealth creation. Yeah. Otherwise people kick themselves that they had to sell it. And I think the other part, especially when I speak to people that have bigger portfolios that are from a migrant background, they just bought and bought and bought and bought as much as they could. Like you look at Italian families, they buy this one, the uncle buys this one, the cousin buys this one, and they've got like this whole block. Like where we grew up, it was like they owned every block, right? The families owned it. And so the big thing in the families was like, hey, we all buy property. Like down the South Coast where we used to holiday, same thing. Like they buy up blocks. There's a lot of nationalities that do that. Maltese do it well. Italians do it so well. Greeks do it well.
Interesting.
I see Indians now do that very well because it's the fastest way to speed up your wealth creation, right? And then I look at some people, I'm like, you've entirely rewritten your wealth for your generation. Like it's intergenerational wealth through property, like no level of income, because they're capped at how much sometimes their income is, right? You take an engineer or you take someone in a salaried role, it's like they know what that income is going to be year on year. Whereas property, boom, it's like you can do a deal and earn what you in a year off the back of a small development deal, for example, and they're starting to realize that, or buying a couple of properties, building a portfolio, retirement would look very different for them as well because they've started later in life. When they came to this country, so they don't have the same super balance. So I think the smart ones have kind of cottoned onto this going, how do we speed up our wealth score? Bang, property is the answer. And it's probably the easiest way to leverage, whereas shares can be a bit more riskier as well. This is less risk.
This episode is produced and brought to you by Social Wave. Social Wave is a strategic content marketing agency helping businesses grow revenue using video, podcasts, and SEO. Head on over to socialwave.com.au to find out more. Now back to the show. You've mentioned like generational wealth as well. And then on our podcast or prep call, we were talking about you've noticed a shift in mentality with younger people getting into wealth as well.
Yeah.
Or even property just in general. I guess, can you touch on that experience and what have you seen changed over the years?
Yeah, I think it's a real mindset around getting into property and ownership. I see so many more younger people now kind of just going, I need to get into the property market. And there are so many good opportunities for first-time buyers. I'm here in North Parramatta and my first property was here in North Parramatta.
Oh, really?
So it's really nostalgic.
Hey.
It was a piece of crap. That's not the point.
But your foot was in the door.
And that's what I tell you to people. I'm like, your first one should be embarrassing. It's like your first car. It should be embarrassing, right? Like you don't start in your forever home. And that's a big part where we're trying to get people to take that first step. Like, how did they do it? Everyone's like, how did they do that? I'm like, they took action. And that's where we're like, action takers are one big part of that equation. Find the right network for people. Parents, again, irrespective of background, will often look at it going, don't make a bad decision, act out of love, almost to the detriment sometimes of that. Don't take that action because it'll go wrong. Hey, mate, but what happens if it goes right? And that's where we look at it going, if you make a good, informed, educated decision, the chances are it's going to go right. Same with business. You can make decisions like these are the ones that are probably going to go right. Investing in your people, investing in systems, investing in like a U-Butte neon sign for the out front, like bells and whistles for the office isn't necessarily going to make the boat go faster from a business perspective. And again, apply those same principles to a property portfolio is what we're talking about. That means our team need to be very well educated on how to talk property or how to address fears that people have. And I think that's another thing that we're talking about is, okay, tell us what could possibly go wrong. Interest rates go up, clients damage, tenants damage a property. There's ways to mitigate that. And I think once we talk openly about some of the fears, it gives them that reassurance that they are making a better or confident decision as well. And that's something that we're big on. Don't make more decisions, just make better or confident decisions that's going to get you closer to your goals.
What about, you talk about a few of these, like either mistakes or myths, things that people seem to think is important, interest rates being one. What are you like sort of busting at the moment that you're seeing a lot?
One is buy more properties. So the number, and I think this probably happens where buy 10 properties in 10 years or buy this
many
many.
Steve McKnight books,
Look, he opened the door for like a lot of people and lending was very different at that stage. Property prices were different at that stage, incomes were different. So trying to compare yourself to when they were buying compared to now is a different beast. Buyers agents, I love them, but they will push a different message as well. Like, look, this client bought 3 properties in 1 year. Now they're comparing themselves because they haven't got there. We'll all do it. So I'm like, well, hang on, run your own race for one. You don't want 3 properties. Maybe you could buy 1 instead of 3. That's a better quality location in a better area that has subdivision opportunities for 10 years' time. We're not buying into that quantity. We're buying quality. The other one is, I guess, looking at, okay, what can you do versus what do you want to do? That's you financially, you're limited by how much you earn and how much deposit you have, unless you get money from parents, which that's, again, another big thing, right? So parents, helping out as well, or wanting to help out. And then there's pressure. You do it for one child, they got to do it for other kids as well. So having these delicate conversations around family and money, but we're not shying away from it. It's like, let's go there. Let's have a chat. Is it the option? Otherwise, it's a yes or a no. And you got to work in with those as well. And the other one is don't compete. Don't compete with other people. So again, you ask me what conversation we're having from a loan perspective, you can see that's got nothing to do with the loan. It's got everything to do with the mindset. And again, when I've spoken to a lot of property investors that have built portfolios, the common denominator is they've all invested in their self-development. They've done a Tony Robbins, they've done self-development courses, they've done a personal MBA, they've made tons of mistakes, for example, but all they've done is fail forward. And like I tell this to clients, you think you're investing in property, the greatest return on investment will be investing in yourself. And so again, we've done years ago, Bernie and I did Tony Robbins, changed our life completely.
Was this like with the power, what was it called?
Unleash the Power.
Unleash the Power,
Unleash the Power Within.
Yeah.
And for us, those couple of days just changed how we saw the value that we saw in ourselves, our relationship, the business value, for example, home value. And so we subscribe to that. So self-development's part and parcel of our own journey as well.
Recently, I've seen you sort of more engaged on sort of doing speaking engagements and working with aggregators and things like that as well, right? So is this sort of part of the new direction you want to take things? Like what's sort of the next few years looking like for you? Absolutely.
I think I've been really fortunate, for example, to share my journey. I'm one of 18,000 brokers, but I think where my journey is I mean, it's still a male-dominated industry. It's a male-dominated. The pressures that come with being a broker, so working with clients at a fairly, call it, stressful time in their life. It's a part of their time where they're going through a stressful experience, managing or leading a team, husband role, maybe father role, leader role. So there's all these different alter egos, all these different roles and responsibilities you have in your life. I certainly struggled with the transition, for example. New dad, I'm a new dad. Work and business is a very simple equation. Put in the work, get the results, shows up on a balance sheet or shows up in a bank account, shows up in clients. Child, I don't know, like, am I doing well? I'm just like, I feel like I'm never doing well. So I'm like, how's this equation work? Play the long game like that. Girls
delayed gratification.
Girls are 2 and 4 now. They're like, Dad, I love you. I'm like, okay, I think I'm doing a good job. And even with like now son-in-law, now they're grandparents. So they're trying to find their feet. My mum, it's my brothers and our uncles. They're trying to find their feet with these new roles as well. So that's given me a new perspective. And going through COVID, especially being particularly busy in the property market, no one's heart bleeds that we were very, very busy. It just had its own unintended consequences. I'm stuck at home with like a few-month-old baby. I'm working like a demon. I was very open. I got like really bad autoimmune issues, alopecia, if anyone's aware of that, psoriasis. And the doctor's response was like, you got to stress less. I'm like, you see my house, mate? It's like a zoo. And I think that gave me a level of empathy going, at what cost is perceived success? Yes, sure, I can write loans. I'm certainly not Australia's best mortgage broker. Yeah, rankings will come out. I'm up there. Great. The other part is that can come and go, and it does. It comes and goes, right? But I think the one constant is husband, father, family, having that success. And I can only look through my own industry, seeing what high performers have gone through and then having lost either their health, call it mental, physical health, or relationships. At what cost? And I think I drew a line in the sand going, no, I'm not. I will play within the confines that I can. Can I do more? Absolutely. But that means that I can't go to the gym in the morning. Yeah. It means that when I come home, I can't talk because I've been on the phone all day and now I can't communicate with the girls. Or I'm fried. It means that on the weekends, I don't want to go out because I just want to sit at home because I've been in front of the computer all day. And I was like, no, I've got to rewrite my own script. And so, going to a 4-day work week, Thursdays off, tempted to go into the office on a Thursday, because it's an area that I can control. It's what I know. But no, it's a home day with the girls, and that takes time to adapt to that new role as well. No weekend work, no after hours. And then it plays in your mind going, am I leaving opportunity on the table? Am I not working hard enough? Do people think that I'm just, I'm a lifestyle broker? It's like, well, I've just had to shut that all out and go, I'm running my own race. At some stage, the girls will be self-sufficient. They'll want to hang out with their friends. But I feel when I'm working, work hard. When I'm home, be home. When I'm at the gym, be at the gym. And that's kind of helped me to when I show up. That's the role that I need to play as well. Because I think when you transition home and I'm still broke at Aaron, I'm on a phone call and the kids are screaming, it's like neither's getting the best of me.
Yeah.
Clients, I'm distracted. The kids, I'm not present. Like there's no one winning here as well. And to your point around that message, I've shared that message, for example, because I feel like a lot of brokers, again, I can only speak from my own experience, were suffering in silence. And when I did that, when I had that talk, the amount of people that reached out, I was like, oh, I've struck a nerve or a chord here, because the industry is saying, write more loans, write more loans, write more loans. Like, yeah, that's great. I can, but no one's telling the actual true human cost and what's going on here.
And that's pretty like a theme that we've even seen today with Matt Purcell, who was a previous podcast guest just before yourself. And he said he sat down with a billionaire, you had the opportunity, and he said, what's it take to become one? And the first thing was, well, are you happy with what costs? And that was the question that was thrown back to him. And so this is exactly echoing what you're saying, which is maybe on a surface level, you see they've got the nice car, the nice house, they've got the successful business, the picture perfect environment. And then when you dig down deeper, it's like, what are they sacrificing?
Okay. So with the nice car, so the way I got to explain this, again, same thing. I saw successful brokers and you always go, how'd you do it? Tell me the hack. And they're like, all right. But imagine I had a really nice car, pick a car out. My dream car is a Ferrari 360 Medina. Imagine I had that and I drove that here. Would my problem still be the same? Yeah, the challenges will still be there. Yeah. If I had more money in my bank account, some problems are different. Some problems will still be there. The kids will still cry. My wife still wants quality time. They're not problems. That's life. My health will still need to be the same. So the car I drive or the house I live in won't change some of that. My life will adapt and be a bit different, but the problems will still be there, or like some of those requirements will still be there. So I think that's where I've like reconciled that, and that will time that I want some of those things in life, but in due time.
When the doctor kind of like, thank you for sharing that story as well, but it's just also, I just wanted to ask, when the doctor gave you that news of you have to stress less, at what point did you kind of realize, I actually have to implement changes in my life now? And I guess, has it been recent that these changes have come into place, but also what else have you done to find balance for yourself to, I guess, heal and find time for yourself?
Yeah. So when I came home, Ben's like, did you need a doctor to say that? Because I've been saying that for ages.
You haven't been listening.
And you know how it's like, I've been telling you that. Like, the doctor says it, so now it's all good. I'm like, yeah, but he's got a white coat on, you don't. And I think that's probably where Ben's like, now what are you going to do about it? And again, kind of throw that challenge down to me. She knows how to kind of hit my spot.
Action
I'm like,
taker.
All right, so here's what we're going to do. Phone, for example, like my phone diverts to the office permanently. The expectation is when you call your broker, you get through to them directly. Now we have to rewrite that script. My phone goes to the office, our team will then handle it. If it's urgent, it comes to me. And that's, again, okay, let's rewrite the script on that. Health and well-being. So I went through a big journey. Acupuncturist, for example, doubled down on herbal medicine, diet, cleaned up diet, for example. So it's 1 cup of coffee in the morning, boom, done. Gym becomes non-negotiable. When I'm showing up at the gym, things tend to fall into place. That's my happy place. And no phone, for example. I get up in the morning, early morning, to make sure I'm there. Started doing Pilates, for example. Again, I sit all day. It's a great way to stretch your body out. I listen to affirmations and 10-minute drive to the office. I listen to something nice like an affirmations, or I'll pick out a small motivational video or podcast, for example, and listen to that. I have a good community of a couple of friends, and the dads that are very similar situations to me, self-employed dads in the area. We catch up. Now we're not catching up for a boozy night. We catch up for a nice dinner, for example. So again, choices around alcohol. I don't mind a beer here and there, but I'm not a big drinker. That means I can't get up and train in the morning, right? Or I'm in a bad mood the next day. So I think, and then I'm a Verta specialist. So like Bernie jokes, it takes a little army to keep me going, but it does. Like I'll do things and have the time to myself. I like going to like, these bathhouses, like the contrast therapy, hot, cold, sauna, steam.
Cryo and stuff like that.
I love it, right? And so I need to carve out time for that. But that's what I need to do to keep my nervous and my, what would you call it, parasympathetic, my nervous system in check. And I can feel it. The second things are spiraling a little bit out of control. It's like you're not making good decisions. You get a little bit short and sharp. It's like, that's not how I want to be. And journaling, like and so I'm like, everyone keeps talking about it. So it must be true. Like these people they're trying to sell me some product, like, sell me their journal. Because I would just get a book from Kmart, just plain paper and just write in it. And so it started with that. And now it's like gratitude in the evening. So just write down a few things, for example. And it's funny how you keep doing it and everyone talks about it, how that builds that muscle of like, yeah, I am appreciative. So today I'll go back and like had the opportunity to do something like this, for example. This message may strike a chord with someone that may help adapt or change their lifestyle. It's like, that's all we need, just to talk to one person. This is something my girls could listen to at some point in the future. This snapshot in my life right here, right now is captured. Team will get something out of this as well. So I think for me, it's like, okay, one thing's happened, but there's a bit of a ripple effect as well. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Because I know that, on the call, like before this podcast as well, you were saying that you have these anchors in your life. For example, the gym you're very passionate about because if that keeps you anchored, everything else goes because
Correct.
The muscle thing, it's not just about physical muscle, it's about your mental muscle as well.
The mental gym, I talk about going to the mental gym. That's probably like the most underrated muscle that we've got. Controls everything, but just that feeding it with good stuff. Like I'm funny, it's about affirmations. I did one around money affirmations for quite some time, and I said to Bernie, money's coming, and we're gonna check in the mail. Like, who gets a check in the mail, right? And I've got a refund on something. I was like, that's pretty cool. Coincidence? Probably, but putting it out there, it's like another one around opportunity. Like putting out there opportunity. We want to get our own office. Put it out there, wrote it on our top 10 projects for the year. Opportunity came. It's like, this is what happens when you put it out there. Like, it's the universe is trying to help you, and can sound woo-woo, but that's the space that we found solace in, like, was the woo-woo, and it works.
Yeah. Psychologically, it's going to give you the reminder to work towards it too.
You see it every day, right? Power of a vision board. My vision board's on the mirror every day. Like, this is what I'm working towards, and tick, that's done. That success leads to more success, breeds that momentum, for example. Like, you're going in a direction. There's this great thing like drift versus staying on track versus off track. Like, you hear that thing like 1 degree off course will take you so far over the year. It's like, this is what happens when you just make one bad decision that leads to another bad decision, leads to another bad decision, for example. It's like, how do we avoid making bad decisions? Well, I've got a spreadsheet called Daily Success. And it's like, get up in the morning, tongue scraping, lemon water, listen to a morning meditation, hit the gym, cold shower, do some affirmations in the on the way to work, put my essential oils. Like, there's just a daily rhythm that I'm like, if I just stick to this,
things will be okay.
Things will be pretty good.
So it's like there is almost, to take a full circle, a degree of stoicism, because I think stoicism teaches about just taking control of what you can control, and there's external circumstances that you can't, and you just have to accept that. That's right. Like, there's, I can't remember the name of the poem, but it was just like, I went through my own mental health issues and stress with work, 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And there was this Australian psychologist. She's passed away now, but she wrote a book, Claire Weekes. And I think it was like something about this. It's called a serenity prayer,
right?
And it was sort of along the lines, and I don't remember exactly how it goes, but it was something like thank God I have the awareness of understanding what I can control and what I don't.
So true.
And the crazy thing is most people now, or a lot of people, get fixated on being upset or stressed or, getting themselves worked up about things that are externally out of their control, just circumstantially got dealt a card. And, we talk about the whole migrant thing from the beginning. That is the ultimate, card getting dealt of your circumstances.
Yeah.
So I love the fact that my actual intention of initially having the conversation was really just around the business side of things. And then you took it in the direction of the mental health. And I think that's probably the big lesson here because, we talk about costs and all those things. It's not sexy to talk about these things.
Yeah, correct. And I think, our parents probably had huge mental health issues. They didn't speak
have time to talk about it.
Didn't have time. Who's going to listen to them? Yeah. You're in Australia, the land of opportunity. How could you have mental health issues? Yeah, mate. But you can imagine the uprooting your life, no network, you don't speak the language fluently, child pressures, financial pressures. Dude, mental health, absolutely, right? Just wasn't kosher to talk about it. Instead, they may have drank or some
sort of coping mechanism.
Some mechanism, pokies, I don't know, whatever it was, whatever vice it was, that was their outlet, and that's the only way they could have maybe dealt with it, because they could say they've gone to therapy, they think they're cuckoo, right? So I'm so grateful that we've had this opportunity to talk about it, understand and acknowledge it, that it's happening to some people, and it's like, we can help each other out with this as well, and there's no stigma attached to it.
But it's also how you mentioned male-dominated industry as well, and just a lot of, when you did the talk, it struck a lot of people, or struck a nerve in a lot of people, and maybe just having these conversations and normalizing them, especially around men, is so important. Otherwise you don't realize you might be suffering. You're just going through these motions, and then something might pop up. What was it? Davey was telling you, don't burn out. You've got a kid now. Oh yeah. Going through all these motions. We're very conscious of Candice working too much. Yeah. But just the conversations around it are very important to normalize too.
Isn't it?
The last thing I was sort of wanted to touch on was, again, prep call sheet, some of the stuff that you highlighted was that word around gratitude. But gratitude in the sense of what that was in the context of was just how one of the things that we're seeing played out in sort of the diversity space, let's call it, because it's a podcast about Asians, is there's this sort of not negative, well, I think it's negative, but there's this real push for the us versus them, it's like the whites versus, this. And here I'm sitting here going, well, I think there's a little bit more of a pragmatic way of doing it. But also, we talk about someone like Bin Jiang, who, he sort of pushed this story about him being very grateful and his parents being very, very grateful for coming to this country. This country was very welcoming to him. And yes, there's racism and there's all these things. We're not trying to ignore him, but I think, again, it's all about the perspective of things. And, hence why when I looked at that, I was like, that's a really important point. And I think we should highlight about the fact that you growing up here, whilst you're a migrant, you look different. You had nothing but, good things mostly to share about.
This country, to give it some perspective, if I was in Sri Lanka, I'd be more discriminated against than I am in Australia. And my parents will often say that as well, based on our caste or based on our sub-race in Sri Lanka. Come to Australia, it's a level playing field. What a country. I think we grew up thinking America was a land of milk and honey. You go to America, you're like, yikes, this is so bad. Whereas you come to Australia, if you want to work hard, damn, this country will reward you. You want to do nothing, this country will pay that. If you want to, whatever results you put in, you will get. There's nothing like it, but nothing's stopping anyone from starting a business tomorrow. You don't have to bribe anyone. You don't have to grease any wheels. You want to get an ABN. No one's going to ask you to pay any money for shakedown on that, for example. That's insane. That's one part. Look, I am a little bit fortunate. My name is white. My name's Aaron Christie-David. I don't speak another language besides English. So when anyone interviews me, and that's probably one big part that I think maybe got me a break, which was if I did a phone interview, I sound white. Yeah. And then I turn up and they're like, Aaron. And I was like, it's me. And they're like, Aaron Christie-David. And they don't realize they're doing it. Aaron Christie-David. I'm like, yeah, it's me. A 6 foot brown guy. Right. And at that point, they can't say no because now they get discrimination. So I think that's probably how I got quite a few of my jobs, truth be told. So like, dude, we can't just say no to the bloke. We got him here. He's got the qualifications. Whereas I'm really fortunate, whereas some people have a really ethnic sounding name, they don't get calls. And I used to say to people, like, change your name. As harsh as it sounded, it's your identity. Change your name and see if you get phone calls. And it would work. I'm like, dude, don't put your address down because Southwest Sydney isn't sexy. And I can say because I grew up there. And I think just those, I'm fortunate. I don't have an accent. I'm a white guy in a brown body effectively because we've grown up here. We only speak English. But all that aside, I mean, I went to a school where there was over like 100 nationalities. So how could you be racist? I think sometimes ethnic people were more racist than the Australians.
That's true.
Right? Australians are so accommodating. Like, I've got to tell you, man, I've got heaps of Australian friends, heaps. They don't see me as a brown guy. They see me as an Aussie. Partly it's because we've made an effort to be Australian. And what gets me mad is when people go down to the beach, and we're down the South Coast, and when they talk about the ethnics coming down on Australia Day, I'm like, dude, they're being as Australian as possible. They're having a barbecue down at the beach. Now, yeah, sure, it smells like charcoal or it smells like, I don't know, curry, I don't know what. But man, they're trying to be their best to be Australian. Like, take nothing away from that. It's hard for them to do, you know? They're not used to being down at the beach in their swimmers.
In the sun.
In the sun, right? Maybe we get a different shade of brown. Whereas the Australians want to be browner. We're trying to be whiter. And I guess the irony is not lost on me. So I'm like, they just don't see that. Some of the Australians don't see that from their perspective. Now, they're not right or wrong. It's just like, we all need a bit of perspective, right? There's so many Australians that travel to like our countries. Like, how many Australians have gone to Sri Lanka and love it? I'm like, that's meant to be applauded, man. So I think when I'm going with this country, like, we embrace that multiculturalism. I think we got a lot better. I remember we used to do like multicultural days. I'm not sure they still do that anymore because I think it's just so embedded into our DNA moving forward. But for me, my parents have said, this country will give you whatever opportunity you want. And I think maybe it's part of that responsibility as a parent to go, this is our country now. Whereas I think that initial stage of Migrant was, this isn't home. We can't go that home anymore. And it's that, like, we're a little bit lost in limbo. We came to this country, like, we speak English. We're Australian, for example. We grew up supporting the Australian cricket team, for example. And so I feel like we got really deeply rooted into this. Like, we had barbecues. We hardly ate curry. So, it was a special treat on Sunday. It's our Sunday roast. Growing up was a rice and curry feed. And I think that's where we chose to assimilate and not giving up part of that cultural identity. We're still very Sri Lankan in some parts, but we're also very Australian in some other parts as well. And that's what I feel like this country has accepted us for trying to become Australian without selling out.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, Aaron. And like, I appreciate you also being so open about the whole thing.
No, man. I'm open book.
Well, I mean, it was just...
this is and that's what I love about this. It opens it up. And so this isn't like, we're Asian, we're marginalized, and only we can understand. There's certain unique challenges that happen when you're from an Asian background. But I love what you're doing here, which is a chance, Aussie Asians, just to be able to share their experience. And sometimes we get the journey from each other as well, right?
For sure, yeah. And I think that's the relatability aspect of things as well, where we sort of have shared experiences growing up together. In terms of some of the similar experiences we have within either family or societal environments as well. But I think everyone at the end of the day is just trying to make a good fist of everything in life. And I think we sort of forget about that as well. And I think even just drawing from even an Asian way of thinking, it's all sometimes should be more about the collective, and how do we sort of support each other. So I appreciate you coming on. And sharing your story.
Thank you. Have you got my brother on yet, or
no? Not yet. Soon. We will. Actually, can I just say one thing? You can kill him, and he'd kill me for saying this, but I thought it was hilarious. And Misha's behind the camera; she was on the call.
Yeah.
We said, it was like, well, we're chatting to you today, and then we got Aaron on the show tomorrow, and he said, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Brotherly banter.
This is it. I'm on now. Sean was like, nah, I can't do it because he's been on it. I did, good healthy rivalry. Like, no, he's got him before me. But mate, just to kind of touch on that point, as a community, every community's got tall poppy, man. But yeah, to see each other do well, like that's, again, go back to the point of what you're doing here, raising the standard, being able to share success and celebrate each other's success. So that's what you're championing here is phenomenal, mate. And yeah, I think for anyone listening, if you love it, give some feedback. That's the best feedback loop that there is,
Absolutely.
right? That appreciation for the effort that you guys are putting in, but also two-way feedback's wonderful.
Yeah. That's
right?
it. Yeah. And
no, you go.
Were you going to round out?
Yep.
Okay. I was going to say, obviously, if anyone who wants to get in touch with you, they want to connect with you, or they need Atelier Wealth to help write the loan, what's the best way to get in touch? Yeah,
so I guess you put our socials on there as well. I personally pretty active on LinkedIn, for example. So best way is capture you through there or reach out through our website. But yeah, my only hope is that someone's been able to get something out of this, and if it helps on your journey, then mission accomplished for us all.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for coming
Pleasure.
on the podcast.
Thank you. Done.
Thanks for listening to the Level Asian podcast. Make sure you subscribe and leave us a 5-star review if you enjoyed the episode. And why not share it with friends and family who might enjoy it too? Also, make sure you head over to levelasianpodcast.com to join our email list and to receive the latest updates and get notified when the next episode drops. If you know a great guest we should feature, email us at contact@levelasianpodcast.com or DM us on our socials in the show notes. Catch you on the next episode.